Hi, Dr. Barisic. Welcome to this interview. We are so happy to have you here in Mexico.
Thank you so much.
I would like to make some questions that many people get to use to make us here in Mexico. For example, what do you consider, or how can you explain what is the high doses of fish oil? Risk, benefits.
Well, let's look at the benefits. High fish oil is defined by really the ratio of two fatty acids in the blood, arachidonic acid to EPA. One fatty acid, the arachidonic acid, drives inflammation. The EPA reduces inflammation. You need them both in balance. So a high-dose fish oil is saying, what is the amount of fish oil I need as an individual to get that balance in the appropriate zone? It depends. It depends on your age. It depends on your sex. It depends on your genetics. So how do you know? That's why we do blood testing. Blood testing will tell you, are you taking enough? I took a fish oil capsule 2 weeks ago. It's probably not enough. I took a fish oil capsule every day, one. It's probably not enough. Well, how do you know? Because we've had now thousands of studies saying that's simply not enough to change that ratio, to reduce the levels of inflammation throughout our body. Now, I'm a fairly old person. I'm 77 now.
Wow.
So how much do I take?
You look fine.
Well,
how do you feel?
I feel pretty good.
Oh, it sounds good. You're in Mexico.
But for me, I need to take 10 grams.
10 grams?
10 grams.
It's equivalent in the liquid presentation to how much? 20 milliliters?
Well,
30?
I had 10 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. So this would be equivalent to maybe 17 capsules.
Okay. 17
Yes.
capsules. Many people get surprised when you say high doses of fish oil and you say 17 capsules. But what about the liquid presentation? What are the advantages?
Well, the advantage is no one wants to take 17 capsules of anything. So the liquid allows you to basically take that amount of fish oil to get the adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids much easier. You basically put it in a glass and throw it back. Done.
Then, which are the risks of use high doses of fish oil?
Well, that's why we test. It's saying if that ratio of arachidonic acid EPA dropped too low, you might not have enough inflammation to fight off infections or to mount a first response to physical injuries. So that's the one drawback. But you have to take very high levels to get to that.
In your opinion, Dr. Barisic, you are the expert. You are the specialist in lipids. You have the master's degree in MIT. Please share with us, which are the conditions that requires more fish oil, in your opinion?
I'll give you a quick answer.
Yeah.
Everyone. Everyone. Well, because and I say that not being comedic, because every problem we have in our life, every clinical problem, from obesity to Alzheimer's, these are all conditions driven by excess inflammation.
Wow.
And so, again, there is no medical condition that has an underlying inflammatory factor.
But I have heard from you that neurologic problems need a special doses of fish oil. Is that true or not? And which type of condition are you?
Well, we'll take
the
neurological ones and the ones we've published scientific articles on. Let's take one. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Wow.
Now, we worked with the leading expert in the United States using his subjects, and we gave them 16 grams.
Wow, 16 grams
of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, these were children already on their optimal dose of drugs like Ritalin.
Wow.
And under the eye of a trained psychologist, we saw within 30 days a dramatic improvement in their behavior.
30 days, Barry, for conditions that have no hope?
Well, it's not that they have no hope. It's saying if you're playing the game with one hand tied behind your back, you're not going to play the game very well. All neurological disease is really an inflammatory disease. So again, you have to basically say, I can give a drug, but I can make the drug work better at lower concentrations if I help reduce the inflammatory load in the patient.
And what about the depression and anxiety? Is that this actually increasing over the world in young people?
Well, because they're not taking enough fish oil.
Oh,
Again,
okay.
I go back to our published work.
Yeah.
That we did dose response curves, taking young children who had a major depressive behavior, and we gave them 2 levels of fish oil, 2.5 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. Well, that's a fair amount. Very few people take that amount. The other group, we gave them 16 grams.
Wow.
The same level we gave to our children who had the ADHD. And you saw a dramatic improvement in those getting the high-dose fish oil compared to those getting the low-dose fish oil. So it's like a drug. If I give you a placebo dose, you're not going to get any benefits. I had to give you basically a therapeutic dose to see the benefits. Now, what's the therapeutic dose? The blood will tell you. Now, these children, when we measured their blood before giving them the fish oil, their ratio was about 200.
Wow.
This is extraordinarily high.
200.
Yeah, this is why I had depression. Now, and those who basically took the higher dose, their levels dropped to about 3. And that was why they basically saw the tremendous improvement in terms of their ability to basically no longer be depressed.
Then you are trying to tell us this in your research. You found that high doses of fish oil could be as a drug?
Well, it's used as a drug, but the uses of the drug, they're not using enough.
Wow.
And
Wait, which is the art of side effects? It sounds very,
very
good, but which are...
Here's some of the side effects.
Which could be?
Here's some of the side effects of taking high-dose fish oil and keeping that ratio in that right range. If you're in that right range, what are some of the side effects? Of you become happier, you live longer, you lose weight.
Then we can handle it.
That's right. But that's why, again, what's the right dosage? The blood will tell you. It's personalized medicine. So again, if we want to basically live a longer and better life, we have to use science as our ally. Not guessing, but testing.
Yes. That's very important recommendation. Thank you, very Sears. Now, we want to ask another question. If you can want to answer the questions. The first ones will be the intermittent fasting.
Yes.
It's a trending here in Mexico and USA, and many people is using. In my opinion, I haven't because I treat patients. My patients who are following the intermittent fasting, they lose a lot of mass, muscle mass. In your opinion, what do you can say to the people in this kind of practice?
Well, let's talk about intermittent fasting. What is it? It's all over the place. Here's my good rule on intermittent fasting. Eat your first meal when the sun comes up. Eat your last meal before the sun goes down. Okay, pretty simple. Now, why? Because our body runs on circadian rhythms. Wow. The light coming into our eyes sets clocks in every organ in our body. And those clocks have been basically fairly consistent for millions of years.
Wow.
Now, as we basically eat outside that window, we start to disrupt those clocks. So intermittent fasting say, I'll eat 2 meals a day as opposed to 3. Okay, if you're not eating adequate protein, you're going to eat basically now even less protein. You're going to lose weight, but now a lot of the weight comes from the loss of lean body mass.
Oh my God, then tell us please, which is the minimal protein every day in general?
Let's weigh out for 2 reasons. I'll break into one, what's the minimum to basically not be hungry? Wow. And then the next one, what's the minimum to maintain, if not increase, my lean body mass?
Excellent.
So let's look at the one, how much protein do I need at every meal to stop hunger for the next 5 hours?
How much, Barry?
About 30 grams of protein.
It's crazy. Who can eat 30 grams, Barry?
Well, that's the amount you can put on the palm of your hand.
Okay.
I say, well, if that's good, I'll eat double the size. Metabolism doesn't work that way. You need some protein to stop hunger, but if you eat too much...
What happens if you eat too much?
Well, they basically now, hunger comes back.
Wow.
So again,
Why?
there's a zone because, again, in metabolism, it's basically, in many ways, think of metabolism like a soundboard in a studio. The sound engineer takes the sound and just moves it around until it has the perfect pitch. Drugs act like a light switch. They turn things on and off. My grandson can do that. Metabolism is basically making sure that everything is moving correctly. So this is why metabolic control and metabolic engineering becomes, I think, the way for the future of medicine. How to control our metabolism. Why is that important? It keeps us alive. And so we're looking to basically understand how our diet can basically cause this almost like soundboard, metabolic soundboard, to be in perfect harmony, where all the parts are basically working as a team. So again, our first aspect, to stop hunger, I need 30 grams of protein minimum at a meal, but not more than 40 grams. Now, what's the other aspect? I want to maintain my lean body mass.
Oh, so important, especially when you are getting older.
Exactly. And we have data on this.
Yeah.
Now, that depends on a couple of things. One, it's how much lean body mass you have.
Yeah.
It depends on how active you are.
Okay.
It depends on how old you are.
Wow.
Now, if you're not very active, you won't need as much protein to maintain your lean body mass because you don't have that much. But as we age, our body's ability to take protein from the diet and convert it to basically replace.
It's not fear, Barry.
It goes down. So as we get older, our protein requirements actually get higher.
Okay.
And the final aspect is saying, what data do we have? We now know with these weight loss drugs, injectable weight loss drugs, that they do cause weight loss, but 40% of the weight loss is due to a loss of lean body mass. This is the worst thing that can happen. So again, we want to take the right amount of protein to stop hunger. That'll be about 30 grams a day, about the amount you can put in the palm of your hand, and not much more, but not less. And make adjustments for our physical activity and our age to make sure we maintain our lean body mass. The first sign that basically your end is near is frailty.
Wow.
And that's because the loss of lean body mass.
Wow. Mary, you are talking about something very important, and the people is getting confused because now with the internet and social media, everybody can be an expert in nutrition.
And because nutrition and metabolism in particular, metabolism is really the key, is so complex, they make up stories. Make up stories that have no bearing in reality. They are not substantiated by science. So we ask science to say, is this drug safe to take? Let's see. We'll do some studies. But now your people are confused. They hear these things that make no sense whatsoever and are not verifiable by science. And yet they say, but I heard it on the internet. Yeah. So this is a big problem in trying to get people to say, let's say, what are the facts and what can we do to make your life as long as possible and maintain wellness as long as possible?
Thank you, Barry. Another frequent question. Many people are in love with the ketogenic diet. And independently about your opinion about this diet, I know that you know many things about this. But many people say that the ketones compared with glucose are better for the brain. What is your opinion, and what is the explanation?
Well, first of all, they're wrong. So let's start right there. Now, why do I say this? You only have two sources of fuels you can burn. One, fats, and the other is glucose. The brain is a glucose hog.
Yeah.
And basically it accounts for only 2% of the body weight of your body weight, but consumes 20% of the energy produced.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
And its only fuel it can use most effectively is glucose.
Where comes from at this point then that the doctor says ketone is better for brain?
Again,
where it comes from this?
It comes from basically ignorance of the published data.
Mary.
Now, let's explain that. Now,
Please.
so again, say, that if I have carbohydrates are bad. No, we need certain levels of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Let's say you go on a total fast, no food forever. Not forever, you die in 51 days, but for 35 days. These are experiments done in Harvard Medical School back in the 60s.
Wow.
Now, there's no glucose coming in, and yet their blood glucose levels never dropped below about 65. It's normal, but low normal, but still normal. Where did that glucose come from?
Wow.
It came from basically the brain saying, I'm not getting enough glucose. It sends out the hormone cortisol to break down lean body mass to convert it to glucose.
The emergencies.
And so people say, but ketone bodies, they can be burned. Yes, they can, but they're not very efficient in making ATP. Now, the most efficient source are fatty acids.
Wow.
The glucose is the second most efficient source,
Wow.
and ketone bodies are a poor third.
Wow.
Now, last thing.
Why, Barry? Why fatty acids are better than
Because there's more carbon atoms to make into ATP.
Right.
So again, a ketone body has maybe 4 carbon atoms.
Yeah.
Glucose has 6, and a typical fatty acid has 18. So which one will generate more energy?
And then
the fatty acids.
Then it's possible that the asseveration that the type 3 diabetes comes from this? You're not getting enough glucose in the brain?
Yes.
It sounds terrific, Barry.
And this
like
is,
a nightmare.
And it is a nightmare. And that's why you're seeing things such as insulin or diabetes and various neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's. But that's not the only disease state that's associated with insulin resistance. Virtually every disease state is. Now, why is that? Because, again, insulin resistance has actually very little to do with insulin per se. It has everything to do with the inability to get glucose from the blood into the cell. And that is controlled by one master switch in every one of your 30 trillion cells. It's called AMPK. And if that AMPK is active, it basically will pull glucose out of the blood, bring it into the cell to make now ATP that you need to survive. So, the people who make these statements seem to know nothing about metabolism. But let me add one more thing. In 2007, I thought we'd done a definitive experiment to compare the Zone diet to a ketogenic diet.
Wow.
we controlled the amount of calories. The amount of protein was exactly the same in both.
Wow.
The only difference was the ratio of protein to carbohydrate.
For sure.
And we did this and basically treated the humans, our subjects, like lab rats.
Yeah.
We controlled all their
Yes.
foods. And so what happened after 12 weeks? The Zone diet was remarkably superior in every aspect. In terms of weight loss, in terms of fat loss, in terms of better exercise performance, in terms of basically reduction of loss of calcium. Oh, there was only one category that the ketogenic diet was better. It increased inflammation.
Oh my goodness.
I thought
this is not a good idea.
No, not a good idea. I thought this laid the rest. But ketogenic diets rise and fall like the tides every 20 years. And so we're on the kind of the rise. Ketogenic diets are great. But we showed, nearly 20 years ago, they don't work very well. Oh, that's so old, that means nothing. That's why you do science.
It's so interesting. Many people también is asking about, do you recommend milk and milk products in this Zone diet or not?
Well, milk is a very good source of protein. And it's a very good source of slow-acting protein. It's called casein. 80% of the protein in milk is casein. 20% is whey. Whey protein gets in the body quickly and is metabolized. The casein is slowly basically broken down deeper in the gut, and it releases hormones. Hormones like GPL1 that go from the gut that tell the brain to stop eating.
And what is better to use, talking about milk, without fat or or with fat?
Well, again, without fat is tasteless. Just tasteless. Now,
Yes,
a better
I
thing,
agree.
a better thing to ask is, what's better milk to use? I like 2%, a little fat, but not much. But I like 2% that's lactose-free.
Lactose-free.
About 65% of the people in the world are somewhat lactose intolerant. So this is why I basically say I don't feel good on milk, because they can't metabolize the lactose, and it now basically is being used by the microbes in the gut to give rise to fermentation products that make you feel miserable.
Wow!
But the technology exists is to
Yes.
remove the lactose. And that was one of the first uses of biotechnology several thousand years ago,
Wow.
to remove lactose
Wow.
using microbes.
Wow.
Now we can do it more effectively to remove lactose completely. So when you eat something like yogurt, it has been fermented. Basically, they've added certain microbes to the milk to reduce the lactose.
Perfect, Barry. Thinking about this, there is a lot of advertising about almond milk and coconut milk. Please give us your recommendation, in your opinion.
One word: useless.
Useless.
It's ridiculous.
No, no, no. No, usarla.
Because those milk products
Yeah.
are a lot of fat and a very small amount of protein.
Wow.
This makes no sense.
It's not milk.
No, it's not
It's
milk.
not protein.
That's why you can't call it milk. You say, it's soy milk. Say, no, it's not. It's basically a little soybean oil and and a lot of fat. So again, these milks are basically actually contrary to basically, because remember, one of the key things for appetite suppression is getting adequate levels of protein. If you do not have adequate levels of protein, you will not release those hormones from the gut that tell the brain to stop eating.
Wow. So dangerous. So dangerous. And for the last question, Barry, many people is following the plant diet, the plants diet, or carnivore diet. What do you think about this?
Let's start with the one that is completely silly, the carnivore diet. Just eat meat. Just, real men and real women eat meat. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Why, Barry? Where comes from this?
It came from a couple of bodybuilders, and they say, we're experts in nutrition, saying, no, you aren't. So what happens if you have only protein, you don't have the fats and carbohydrates, especially the carbohydrates, to balance it off. Metabolism is based upon balance.
Yeah.
And so what happens if you don't have enough carbohydrates, basically the metabolism slows down dramatically. Now, that being said, what about a plant-based diet? That's fine if you're getting adequate protein. It's hard to get adequate protein from a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
You can get around that by adding now plant-based protein. It used to be soy protein. Say, I don't like soy. Say, fine, try pea protein. So now, by using plant-based protein concentrates, you can add back plant-based protein to a plant-based diet to basically stop hunger and prevent loss of lean body mass.
Excellent, Barry. When did you create the Zone diet?
Well, the Zone diet was actually created in 1988. I was, working with the Stanford swim teams, and I was working with fatty acids, different combinations, to improve their performance, and they're working great. And then their team went to Japan for summer competitions, and I get responses from the coaches say, "They've never swum better. Their performance is great. They recover almost overnight." I say, "This is great." Then they came back to Stanford, and 2 weeks later, I got calls from the coach saying, "Something's going wrong. They're cramping up. They're not performing well in the pool." I said, "Oh my God, what have I done?" So I went to the bowels of the MIT library and sat there for about a couple of days, going through some very obscure references, and I found the reference I was looking for. The fact is, I thought I basically was able to balance, just using fats, to balance the ratio of good and bad eicosanoids. But I found out if you have a diet that's sharing lots of insulin, it can basically change that balance and cause you to have now more bad eicosanoids being formed. So in many ways, that was the starting point of the discovery of the Zone diet. What would be the right ratio of protein to carbohydrate to control the balance of insulin and glucagon in the bloodstream? So in many ways, that was a moment like in the film Back to the Future, when Doc Brown basically invented the flux capacitor that made time travel possible, is that a couple of days spent in the bowels of the MIT library looking for basically the flux capacitor that made the Zone diet possible.
How many books about the Zone have you been written?
I've now written 19.
19. Are you planning to doing another book?
I'm in the process right now. And
Wow.
this is really a composite, really a summary of my odyssey. And really it has been an odyssey to understand how food controls our metabolism. And the title of this book is called The Wellness Zone. Because wellness, that's something no, wellness is a medical condition.
Yeah.
It can be defined by the absence of insulin resistance.
Wow. No, the absence of the chronic disease.
Well, remember that the insulin resistance is really basically a misnomer itself. It's really, when you have insulin resistance, it's really inhibition of the master switch of your metabolism. That's called AMPK. That's the underlying cause of chronic disease. So again, I'm using this book to basically compile all of the observations and clinical literature over the last 40 years, which I've been exploring this problem, to say, how can we define wellness? We can define disease. You've got a problem.
No.
But how do we define wellness? I'm not sick. That's not a good definition.
No.
So we need a clinical marker of wellness. And I believe the clinical marker, which is a surrogate marker of AMPK activation in each of your 30 trillion cells, is insulin resistance.
And how can we measure MPK?
Well, you can't because it's inside the cell.
Wow, it's so difficult. What a big bar.
Yeah, I could take a I could take a biopsy.
Biopsy?
Yeah, say, well, that's painful. But insulin resistance is a surrogate marker
Wow.
of the inactivity of AMPK.
Okay.
And so by doing that, a simple blood test, you're going to either be well or not well. It's like being pregnant. Either you are
or you
aren't.
not.
Yeah, say there's no ifs, ands, or but. You are or you aren't. And likewise, once we can define wellness, it says this becomes now the focus of medicine going forward. Not to treat the symptoms of chronic disease,
No.
but to maintain wellness. And what if you already have a chronic disease? Well, the more you basically now activate your metabolism, you can basically control those symptoms with fewer drugs, which means less toxicity.
Exactly.
And so again,
That's all we need.
it is. I think it ushers in a whole new era of medicine. We want to focus on maintaining wellness and basically postponing chronic disease for as long as possible.
Barry, I know that you in the past had patents for treat cancer. What makes you change your research from drugs to regular food?
Well, the answer was the 1982 Nobel Prize in Medicine for understanding how a group of hormones called eicosanoids basically were the drivers of inflammation. 40 years ago, we didn't know much about inflammation and disease. We know a lot now, that basically that's the driver. And we now know more about metabolism. So at that time, I actually invented the technology made possible the first and only nanotechnology cancer drug ever developed. It's sold about $5 billion. It still sells $500 million a year. But it dawned on me to say, rather than trying to make cancer drugs work better, if I could control inflammation, I could basically treat virtually every disease state. I said, this is a bigger game. And so that's why I made the transition from drug delivery work on cancer drugs to saying using food as if it were a drug to control inflammation, to keep it in the zone. We need some, but not too much.
Not too much. Now it's October 2024. What is the difference in your research or what you are offering and presenting in your books and your news book between the zone and this new concept that you call
metabolic engineering?
Metabolic engineering. Please, can you explain that, please?
The zone remains the same. The zone is basically where you want to be.
Yeah, the place.
Yes. And now we define that not as a mindset, but say the absence of insulin resistance. That's where you want to get there. Now, how to get there? That's why I now term this as metabolic engineering. And there's 3 components of metabolic engineering.
Why 3, Barry?
Because-
Why not 1?
Because life isn't that simple. I'll use an example. Let's say you want to go to the moon
Yeah.
and say, okay, how do I get from the Earth to the moon? I need a spaceship, probably 3 spaceships. The first one to get me off the ground.
Yeah.
If I'm not getting off the ground, I'm not getting the moon.
Good.
Okay, the first step is a calorie-restricted diet without hunger or fatigue. That's the zone diet. The zone diet is a calorie-restricted diet, the most powerful way to activate AMPK. That gets us off the ground. And then once we're on, get rid of the first stage, now the second stage. We need omega-3 fatty acids. How much?
In the second.
To keep it in inflammation in a zone, not too high, but not too low. Okay, what's the last stage? Polyphenols. Why are they important? Because they basically become the fine-tuning mechanisms to basically control oxidative stress and repair damaged tissue. Now, are they all stages equal? No.
No?
No. When you see a 3-stage rocket, what's the first stage is very, very big. It's hard getting off the ground.
That first one.
So 60% of your ability to get to the zone
Wow.
will be following a calorie-restricted diet for how long? The rest of your life.
The rest of
Oh, that's so hard. I didn't say it's easy, but that's the hard part. The second part, taking adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids to maintain a balance of inflammation and resolution. And the 10%, the final 10%, taking enough polyphenols. So they're all useful, but they're not all equal. But the number one thing that is the hardest is to restrict calories without hunger.
That's a very good point, Mary. And it's my last question. The last frontier or the next frontier in the zone is going to be this technology. Please resume in few words why you create this kind of technology. Is your last frontier or you're looking for more in the zone?
No, I think it's the last frontier. I laid out in the 19 books I've written, it's simple to follow these recipes. It's too hard. I don't have time. I said, stop whining. Stop whining. So,
Do it.
because human beings are driven by either trying to avoid pain or seek pleasure.
Yes.
That hasn't changed in the last 200,000 years. So the challenge is, say, okay, considering the complexity of metabolism, how can I basically restrict calories without hunger or fatigue? And that's basically led to this whole new area of basically making food products that basically do exactly that. Now there's one drug that does that also. It's called Ozempic. Now, Ozempic is a forever drug. You have to inject that drug every week for the rest of your life to keep hunger under control. Now, if you do that, you activate AMPK and you lose weight. You treat diabetes, and you treat heart disease, and you treat liver disease, and kidney disease, and depression. But there's a problem. 2 problems. One, you tend to lose a lot of lean body mass. Second, unknown things in the future. We know there's an association of Ozempic and thyroid cancer.
Wow.
We'll know there will be probably more as more people are using it and things come out of the woodwork. So this is why about half the people who start with Ozempic stop after 2 years. Now, how does Ozempic work? I said activates AMPK. Now, can you develop a dietary technology that also activates, basically does what Ozempic does without the side effects? But it has to have hedonically pleasing characteristics. And what are the things people like to eat? I call them 3 Ps. Pizza, pasta, and pastries.
Yeah.
So I do invent a new technology.
But it don't taste as a drug?
No, it tastes exactly like pizza, pasta, and pastries.
Oh my goodness.
But what it does, it basically enters the bloodstream at a different point from your gut to cause the accelerated release of the same hormone that Ozempic is by injection. So it's a forever diet. I said, you mean I have to eat pizza, pasta, and pastries the rest of my life? I said, if you want to live longer, yes.
Yeah.
That's something that basically appeals to basically a human evolution. Say, I'd like that, and that seems to have no pain.
Wow.
So, and we've done the testing. We did the testing of this before Ozempic was ever introduced. Now we're able to compare our testing to the data from Ozempic. And it turns out that using this new food technology, we're able to basically now have even greater fat loss and an increase in lean body mass.
Excellent.
And that has been
the anti-aging medicine.
It is.
Really.
And say, you mean I can turn back the hands of time by eating pizza, pasta, and pastries the rest of my life? Yes, you can. But make sure you include omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols.
Thank you, Barry. It was a very, very pleasure to interview. Thank you. Is there something that you want to say to the Mexican people?
Well, I do. And this is not to just the Mexican people, but people throughout the world. Is saying, we now understand the complexities of metabolism. And they can be brought under control by our diet. And if we're willing to basically do that, it ushers in a new era of medicine, not treating the symptoms of chronic disease, but maintaining wellness. And with that, all the money we're spending on drug therapy to treat the symptoms, we begin to apply to other things to improve the quality of our planet. It changes the future of mankind. Now, whether or not we have the will to basically follow through is another question.
Thank you, Barry. It's amazing to always speak with you, to share with you. We always learn more and more about everything that you're putting together for the years.
Plus hearing a lot of good stories.
Thank you, Barry. See you very soon, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
God bless you.